It's a day we dreamt of for centuries.
We felt the weight of the world on our shoulder. We knew that people were looking at us worldwide.
A day when 3 men risked everything.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
We knew that Dad had to go on this trip, and I think they only thought they had a 50-50 chance of doing it.
And it's a day that changes the world.
I think it is the greatest achievement in the history of human civilization.
It happens 250,000 miles out in space, but it's seen by over 500 million people here on Earth.
What an amazing thing to witness.
You remember where you were, right?
But it's also a day full of danger.
We all knew we had 3 things were going to happen. We were going to land, we were going to abort, or we were going to crash.
When success or failure comes down to split-second calls.
And bang, we got this computer alarm.
1202. 1202 alarm.
My first thought was, we're dead in the water.
With spectacular remastered footage, this is the minute-by-minute inside story from those who are there. Those who put them there, and those whose lives are changed forever.
By golly, we got a man on the moon. We just put him there.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It's the day we walked on the moon. We first set foot on the moon in July 1969. But the decision to go there is made by President Kennedy at the start of the decade, and spelled out in one of his most famous speeches.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
I was thrilled to be part of fulfilling President John F. Kennedy's dream of man on the moon by the end of the decade. However, the moon was so far away, so remote. Was this really going to happen?
When Kennedy made that beautiful speech, we choose to go to the moon. Remember that from an engineering perspective, we did not know how to do that.
We would have to learn quickly. It's the height of the Cold War. The space race has already started, and the Soviet Union has launched the world's first satellite, Sputnik.
Sputnik was launched on a rocket, and people understood that if the Soviet Union had the capability to launch things into space, that there was likelihood that they also had the capability to launch warheads.
There's no doubt that Sputnik 1 scared the Americans to death, and they suddenly realized they had to pull their finger out and get on it.
Russia had got the first object into space, they got the first animal into space, and they got the first person into space. And the Americans, with their technical superiority, or so they thought, felt on the back foot.
Kennedy decides the way to beat the Soviets is to put a man on the moon.
President Kennedy set out the challenge to do it in the 60s, and everybody devoted their total life to doing that.
Realizing Kennedy's dream within the decade isn't easy. It takes a concerted national effort, unparalleled in peacetime.
The scale of Project Apollo is hard to really even conceive of. At the peak, over 400,000 people were involved. The program cost, at the time, $25 billion, which was more than the Manhattan Project, more than the Panama Canal.
I think it was George H.W. Bush who said that it was the best investment since Leonardo da Vinci had been given a sketchbook. And he's right.
NASA's space program needs more than money. It needs men willing to risk their lives piloting highly experimental spacecraft. In 1961, Alan Shepard becomes the first American in space. In 1962, John Glenn orbits the Earth. By the time projects Mercury and Gemini give way to Apollo in the mid-60s, America's astronauts are superstars.
Most of us came from the military, where we'd been almost incognito, and all of a sudden you're celebrities.
I thought these guys were the coolest guys walking the planet. You know, this is the time the Beatles were around. I thought they were cooler than the Beatles.
I wouldn't call it a rock star quite, but you could get a real swell head if you didn't watch out because you got a lot of attention.
32 astronauts take part in the Apollo program, but only 3 will make the journey to the moon on Apollo 11. The command module pilot is 38-year-old Michael Collins, the one crew member who won't walk on the moon.
Clearly, I did not have the best of the 3 seats. However, I thought it was a great honor to be a part of the Apollo 11 crew.
Lunar module pilot Buzz Aldrin may be about to walk on the moon, but for his 11-year-old son, Andy, that's not what sets him apart.
My dad wasn't cool because he was an astronaut, because everybody's dad was an astronaut. My dad was cool because he could pole vault, you know, and nobody's dad could pole vault.
First man to walk on the moon will be the mission commander, 38-year-old Neil Armstrong.
Well, Neil Armstrong was probably the perfect choice to make the first step on the moon. He was dedicated, he was competent.
Probably one of the coolest guys I'd ever known. By cool, I mean steady under pressure. He was unflappable.
That unflappability is tested in May 1968, when Armstrong takes part in a lunar landing simulation at Ellington Air Force Base in Houston. 200 feet above the ground, his craft suddenly loses pressure, forcing Armstrong to eject. He cheats death by seconds. Now comes the mission itself.
When Mom and Dad called us for a meeting in the dining room, it's like, oh,
what trouble are we in?
Yeah, we're in trouble. Well, this must be serious.
And basically said, just want you guys to know that there is some risk in this mission, but you know, we're confident we're coming back at least. Whether we get to land or not, we don't know.
The way that the crew viewed it was this would be the first mission to attempt to land. And I think they only thought they had a 50-50 chance of doing it.
It's the morning of July 16th, 1969. Launch day. In a few hours, the astronauts will begin their 4-day journey to the moon. Perched on top of the most powerful rocket ever invented.
When I drove up, it was dark. I drove past, I don't know, a couple 100,000 people at 5 o'clock in the morning. They'd been there all night. And there was the Saturn lighted on the launch pad. And it is in the middle of this black ocean. Oh God, what an excitement.
The press were in a sort of corral about 2.5 miles away from the launch site. I don't think anyone was allowed nearer than about 2 miles. I mean, quite apart from us, there were hundreds of thousands of people who would be camping on the dunes. It's almost like a sort of jamboree thing.
I'm outside and it's sunny now.
David Shoemaker is at the press site. David?
Walter, good morning. Of the more than 3,000 reporters assigned here, at least a third...
It was a beautiful day. God, it was beautiful. It was just, everything was perfect.
Swing arm now coming back as our countdown continues.
In the days before 24-hour news, all the networks clear their schedules to carry the launch live. Among the watching millions is future astronaut Mike Massimino.
In July of 1969, I was 6 years old. I was sitting there watching the black and white television in the living room. I remember thinking as I was watching that launch that this was the most important thing that ever happened in the history of the world, I thought, as a little boy. Same time, I was a big baseball fan. The New York Mets, my team, won the World Series that year. 2 miracles happened in the summer of 1969.
T-minus 25 seconds.
That rocket was big. I mean, there's no way that rocket gets off the ground.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
There was just a huge, huge flash and a fantastic noise. Almost like a bomb going off. Wow, shattering.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Away from the crowds, Neil Armstrong's family watches the launch from a specially chartered boat.
We were sort of off to the right. And what this meant was that all the exhaust came our way.
And, you know, this buffeting of air against your chest is just, it's like nothing, you know, I've ever felt since.
And you say, how is that standing straight up? I mean, it's barely moving. I mean, it's inching, and it's inching, and it's inching.
Inside, 3 men risking their lives to fulfill the dream of centuries.
When the rocket goes up, it's very stately, no deviation of path. Inside, it doesn't feel that way at all. The engines down below you are swiveling to keep it in balance, and so you're feeling little sideways jerks.
And suddenly, I don't know, it overcomes gravity, and a swoosh.
The Saturn V rocket blasts Apollo 11 out of Earth's atmosphere. Just 12 minutes later, they're in orbit, and our greatest adventure begins. It's July 16th, 1969, and the crowds at Cape Kennedy have just witnessed one of the great spectacles of the century. One by one, the spent sections of the Saturn V rocket fall away, and the third stage engine fires to set Apollo 11 on course for the moon.
It looks like you're well on your way now.
By day 2, astronauts Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins are halfway there, and in good spirits.
Hello there, sport fans. You got a little bit of me, plus Neil's in the center couch, and Buzz is doing the camera work this time.
Back on Earth, an army of reporters is chronicling the epic journey.
It was a story everyone could join in and feel part of. I mean, I suspect when, perhaps in another 2 or 3 centuries, people are going to be looking back on this like a Columbus moment.
But unlike Columbus, this landing will be seen by millions on live TV.
With the latest developments from the
Apollo 11 moon mission, correspondent Walter Cronkite.
We realized we were in a seminal moment in not only in American history, but in television history.
The latest developments from the moon
mission, as you have heard,
and we had gone to the moon lots of times in our rehearsals. But this was live television. This was astronauts putting their life on the line.
We felt sort of the weight of the world on our shoulder. We knew that people were looking at us worldwide.
The astronauts' families are watching too. But they're not just following the story. They're part of it.
The coverage was pretty much nonstop. We lived in that bubble, and Space Mania was there all the time. I think it was a huge challenge for my mom in a lot of different ways. I think she was primarily concerned about protecting the kids.
Andy, would you like to go to the moon?
Well, I haven't really decided yet.
I didn't know you'd had it in mind. I couldn't go through this twice, I'll tell you.
We were watching along with everyone else. The only difference was that in our house we also had a squawk box, so we could listen to some of the air-to-ground transmissions.
Good radar data. We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good.
Our mother, she was very tough. And we're amazed at, because she had to be worried. She had to be, you know, just absolutely deathly frightened. But we never saw that.
It's 8 a.m. on Sunday, July 20th. As the astronauts orbit the moon, the men of Mission Control are arriving at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston, Texas. In just 7 hours, Flight Director Gene Kranz will oversee Apollo 11's descent to the surface of the moon.
You have a single shot to get things right. Are we go to start the descent? Are we go to continue descent? Are we go for the landing?
Working under Kranz is Steve Bales. Not long out of college, he will track the progress of the spacecraft and monitor its guidance systems.
Can you imagine? Here we are. They're letting people like me, 26 years old, sit at consoles. If we made a mistake, it wasn't just us that were in trouble.
3 years from now, astronaut Charlie Duke will walk on the moon. Today, he's the capsule communicator, the only member of the team who will speak directly to the crew during landing.
My focus was, let's get to the moon and let's land on the moon. That was what I was focused on. Let's just get it done.
That this was a very young group of people who were going to do something monumental, and they were willing to take the risk to be the ones that if we didn't get the crew back, we were the ones that were responsible for that.
Delta 6-0, bird time 557.
Mission Control keeps in contact with the crew by radio on a journey almost entirely programmed by computer. Houston works flat out to prepare the lunar module for powered descent.
From 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, we worked like the dickens to get that vehicle powered up, to get it checked out, to get the computer system turned on, to get all its systems aligned just right. We wanted this to be a success. So did the country, but we really did.
One man is playing a unique role in today's landing. 6 months ago, Frank Borman took Apollo 8 to within 60 miles of the moon's surface and became one of the first men ever to see the Earth from space.
I think the most inspiring side of my life was looking back at the Earth from the moon.
Today, Borman is at the White House. His job is to brief the new president, Richard Nixon, on the lunar landing.
I don't think President Nixon was an expert in any way in the space program, but he was enthusiastic about it.
All the president's men know the importance of the next few hours.
We knew that this was capturing the attention of the world. We were told that by the networks every night. So yes, we knew that this was of worldwide consequence.
The Nixon administration has inherited more than just Apollo. There's growing civil unrest at home and an escalating war in Vietnam, where more than 500,000 American troops are now engaged.
You got to understand the times. We were all beginning to wonder about Vietnam. And Martin Luther King gets shot. And then Bobby Kennedy gets shot. And suddenly people are saying, what in the hell is happening to our country?
We were dealing with demonstrations, and we were dealing with significant kickback to the Vietnam War. So it was kind of like the moon landing was a breath of fresh air where we could all come together and celebrate at least one thing that united all Americans.
The moon landing could also boost the president's popularity, but only if it succeeds.
I told President Nixon if there was a disaster, he would get the blame for it. So I said, although I didn't anticipate it, be prepared in case we have to send messages to 3 widows.
It's midday at the Manned Spacecraft Center, less than 4 hours from the scheduled landing time. Flight Director Gene Kranz prepares to make the speech of his life.
I called my team together. We went to a very private communications loop. No one else could hear what I was going to say, and I told them how proud I was of them. And I told them that I believed in them, and I will stand behind every decision you make.
And he said, I want you to know something. It's hard for me to even say this. I want you to know something. However this turns out, we're going to go out of this room as a team.
Work that we are going to do today is going to be in the history books, and you are going to be the ones that accomplish this task.
He didn't say this, but we all knew we had three things were going to happen. We were going to land, we were going to abort, or we were going to crash. And I didn't like to think about the other two.
Okay, we're about to open the hatch now. Right.
At 12:32 p.m., Armstrong and Aldrin complete their checks on the lunar module and prepare to undock. Leaving Collins behind, they begin their perilous journey to the surface of the moon.
Roger, go ahead, Houston, final 11.
On the far side of the moon, a 250,000 miles from Earth, an extraordinary maneuver is taking place.
Roger, Eagle, undock.
Leaving Michael Collins to orbit the moon alone, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are now inside the lunar module. Codenamed Eagle, this is the craft that will take them to the moon's surface.
Roger, how does it look? The Eagle has wings. Roger. Roger, go ahead, Houston, final 11.
On the far side of the moon, a 250,000 miles from Earth, an extraordinary maneuver is taking place.
Roger, Eagle, undock.
Leaving Michael Collins to orbit the moon alone, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are now inside the lunar module. Codenamed Eagle, this is the craft that will take them to the moon's surface.
Roger, how does it look? The Eagle has wings. Roger.
It's a spectacular spacecraft, and one of the things that's very distinctive about it is it doesn't look like it'd be very good at flying. But one thing that you have to remember is that they didn't have to worry about it being aerodynamic because they didn't have to worry about traveling through the atmosphere. But they did have to worry about weight. They had to make sure that this spacecraft was as light as possible. So one of the things that they put into the design is they took out the seats and they had the astronauts stand as they landed.
I think you got a fine looking flying machine there, Eagle, despite the fact you're upside down.
As Armstrong and Aldrin disappear from view, Collins is left to circle the moon, awaiting their return.
Michael Collins, who of course is that unique person who has been the most alone human being ever, because he was the other side of the moon when his mates were this side of the moon and the rest of humanity was over there on the Earth, you know.
I was amazed to be accused of being the loneliest man in the whole lonely planet behind the lonely satellite, and wasn't it lonely? And the answer to all those is no, I was fine. I considered myself to be almost like a king. It was my domain. I was happy there. I was their ticket home.
I never asked him a really tough question, I would think. What would you have done if those two guys hadn't been able to launch back off the moon and rendezvous with you?
It was nothing we had ever discussed. However, it was a reality that all three of us understood quite clearly. I wasn't going to commit suicide if they were going to stay forever on the surface of the moon. Yes, I would be coming home by myself.
We had obits on the three astronauts. In that sense, I guess you could say that we were prepared for the worst. I know that the White House had written a speech for the president if the mission failed.
This is a document here that deals with the possible contingency should something have gone wrong. It talks about the brave men and their sacrifice for the good of mankind. And in fact, he even goes here and says that Mother Earth that dared to send two men into the unknown, that these men will be missed.
Eagle, we got you now. It's looking good, over. Roger, copy.
Now, Mission Control must meet the challenge set at the start of the decade. Years of preparation come down to these next few minutes.
You could cut the tension in that room with a knife. It was like Everybody knew this was the game. This was it. This is what we're going to do.
Things were proceeding right on schedule until the descent started, and then things began to not come in completely unglued, but a lot of problems developed as we started down.
The communications are ragged. It's just complete static. It's almost impossible to hear. You can't hear the crew.
As a mission rule, if you had so many seconds of data dropout, that could lead to an abort.
I have one decision that is solely the flight director's responsibility. Do we have enough information to start the descent to the surface of the moon?
Roger, you're a go to continue power descent. You're a go to continue power descent.
Krantz decides the descent can continue, but it's just a taste of the problems to come.
When you're going down this little vehicle 9 miles above the moon at 5,000 miles an hour, it's nothing that's particularly safe.
Looking good. Roger, Neil.
And bang, we got this computer alarm.
1202, standing by. 1202 alarm.
1202 came in and it just hung in the air there for seconds. 1202, can you give us some help there?
1202, what's that? 1202 alarm.
No one is sure what the 1202 alarm means, but it's not good news.
My first thought was, we're dead in the water. It's abort.
Mission Control must now decide the significance of the 1202 alarm. Can the landing continue? Apollo 11 is now 30,000 feet above the Sea of Tranquility, its intended landing site on the moon. Back on Earth, the astronauts' families are following the journey, unaware of the drama unfolding in space. Apollo 11 is now 30,000 feet above the Sea of Tranquility, its intended landing site on the moon. Back on Earth, the astronauts' families are following the journey, unaware of the drama unfolding in space.
We were obviously glued to the squawk box, watching TV, but I didn't really understand just how perilous it had gotten. I think I had a disturbing amount of faith in the technology, and I was crazy, right? Because the amount of risk that we were taking on in that whole mission. If I had known that as an 11-year-old, I'd have been a lot more nervous, I think.
Mission Control is masterminding a giant leap into the future, relying on the technology of the time. With 7 minutes to landing, the lunar module's onboard computer is overloaded with data.
This computer was a marvelous thing for its time. But still, think of all it had to do. It had to figure out how fast it was going, display some information to the crew, send some information to us, and all the time guide the vehicle. And it was done on a system that was smaller than your cell phone, a lot smaller than your cell phone.
1202, standing by. 1202.
The 1202 alarm is warning Mission Control the computer can't complete all its tasks. Steve Bales must decide if the mission can continue.
Steve was doing exactly what he should have. He checked with his backroom people. He knew how to use the seconds he had, but I was sure hoping he'd hurry up.
Now the crew, too, is growing concerned.
Give us a reading on the 1202 program alarm.
15 seconds may seem like a short time, but when you're in the middle of landing on the moon, 15 seconds is like an eternity.
Bales makes his call. The overworked computer is still capable of processing the essential navigation data.
It's executive overflow. If it does not occur again, we're fine.
The alarm is not critical. The landing can continue.
Steve Bales hollered, "We're go on that alarm flight."
We're going that alarm? Roger, we got you. We're going that alarm.
If I recall, I didn't even wait for Gene Krantz to say we're go. I just clicked my button and I said, "You're going that alarm."
Eagle, Houston, you're a go for landing, over. Roger, understand. Go for landing. 3,000 feet.
The 1202 is only the first of 5 alarms that go off as Armstrong and Aldrin close in on a lunar surface scarred by impact craters and mountain ranges.
A landing on the moon is very demanding. It takes a lot of skill. It takes a cool mind and presence. You start seeing things that you didn't see in the photographs. You know, man, there's a lot of rocks down there, and man, look at all these craters.
Now Houston has another problem. As descent continues, it becomes clear the spacecraft is heading towards a boulder field. While Aldrin calls out altitude and velocity,
35 degrees, 750, coming down to 23.
the mission commander takes action.
There was nothing that Armstrong could do but take the controls and land the spacecraft himself.
540 feet and a 15.
He overflew the primary landing site and went beyond it because he didn't like what he saw.
540 feet and a 15.
But as he flies over the boulder field in search of a safe landing site, Armstrong's using up precious fuel.
They knew they were going long, and they knew they were getting low on fuel. And the combination of the two ain't good.
50 down at 2.5.
For the first time, mission control is powerless. It all comes down to the crew.
Altitude, velocity, light. 8.5 down, 220 feet.
It was Neil's decision, land or abort.
Coming down nicely, 200 feet.
The flight director said no more calls except for fuel. In other words, anything we would have said would just got in their way.
Okay, the only call outs from now on will be fuel.
And so I radioed Eagle 60 seconds, and that meant he had 60 seconds for fuel to land, or we would have an abort.
60 seconds. Lights on. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward.
Then I called 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Uh-oh.
30 seconds. Forward.
He still wasn't on the ground, but he was close.
Forward. Forward. 40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Fake shadow.
I'd never felt such tension in mission control as we were going into these last few seconds.
And he doesn't. He just greases the baby in.
Contact light. Okay, engine stop.
When I heard Buzz say contact, engine stop, I said, copy you down, Eagle.
We copy you down, Eagle.
A few seconds later, that's when Neil said, in the calmest voice I can imagine,
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
I was so excited I couldn't even pronounce tranquility. It came out twang.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
I've always thought, when he said you got a bunch of guys about to turn blue, he was looking right at me, because I must have been one of the bluest of the blue. It was incredible.
Tranquility, be advised there are lots of smiling faces in this room and all over the world, over.
I thought Neil carried the whole thing off beautifully with about, maybe 30 seconds of fuel remaining. That's a lot.
News of the landing travels the world in seconds.
We were watching Channel 2 in New York, which was Walter Cronkite at the time. You know, he was a guy to listen to for this sort of stuff.
I don't know if Cronkite was crying. I was crying. I mean, this is just too much. I mean, man on the moon?
That's where these guys were. They're up there. They're actually up there.
From Central Park to central London, from South America to Africa to Asia, in almost every nation outside China and the Soviet Union, the news is received with wonder and rapture.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Everybody remembers where they were. I was with Roger Taylor, who was my drummer already, And it was the very beginnings of Queen, and we were down in Cornwall staying at Roger's mum's house, and she had a telly with a screen about this big, and we all sat around it and watched this incredible thing, almost unbelievable.
After the landing, the thing I remember was that when I came out, we had the most beautiful moon in the sky. And now I took a look up there, and it was really my first thought is, by golly, we got a man on the moon. We just put him there.
It's a historic moment, but the most memorable part of the journey is still to come. The world waits as Neil Armstrong prepares to take our first steps on the moon. It's July 20th, 1969. The lunar module has been on the surface of the moon for nearly 7 hours. Armstrong and Aldrin are supposed to be resting, but it's proving difficult. It's July 20th, 1969. The lunar module has been on the surface of the moon for nearly 7 hours. Armstrong and Aldrin are supposed to be resting, but it's proving difficult.
And they're getting ready to step out onto the moon's surface far earlier than had been planned.
It was a moment that the Earth stopped still to watch. But I don't think anything since then has caused that moment of pausing, where there's something that's so exciting happening that everybody wants to stop and see it.
38-year-old Neil Armstrong will begin to step down the 9 steps of the lunar landing module to the surface of the moon itself. And what a moment that will be.
He came from the crew compartment near the top of the lunar module. He released the television camera. It's a slow scan television camera, and this is the image that went to television sets around the world.
And we're getting a picture on the TV.
It allowed the world to witness the first lunar landing and feel like participants.
Over 500 million people will share the next few historic moments.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming.
You're really leaning in, trying to figure out, what's going on and where's the bottom of the ladder and.
Yeah, I'm gonna step off the limb now.
Nobody knew what he was going to say. Couldn't have been a better thing to say.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The waiting world and the watching world, those words were very, very powerful.
Surface is fine and powdery.
I think that he had thought about a number of things that he might say, but my belief is that he didn't make a decision about what he would say until they had actually landed.
Okay, I'm gonna leave that 1 foot up there.
19 minutes after Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin jumps down onto the lunar surface.
There you go. Beautiful view. Isn't that something?
I'm watching it, and I'm convinced that, my dad's going to hop, he's going to trip, he's going to fall on the moon, flat on his back, of course, like a dead bug in front of 600 million people. But really, most importantly, this is going to be in front of my 200 classmates.
Magnificent sight out here. Magnificent desolation.
The astronauts spend 2¼ hours outside the spacecraft. Every moment has been carefully choreographed, not least the raising of the flag.
NASA suggested playing the Star-Spangled Banner while the crew was on the moon, and I was opposed to that.
Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes from the lunar.
We didn't need to magnify the American achievement by playing the Star-Spangled Banner because everybody in the world knew it was American crew anyway.
We weren't colonizing space. We weren't claiming territory for ourselves. But it certainly brought America together. Certainly did that. When you've gone through what we went through in those 1960s, for a brief time at least, America was back.
The astronauts set up scientific experiments, collecting samples of moon rock for analysis, and take a series of memorable photographs.
Some of them are iconic, like the picture of Buzz in his spacesuit standing on the moon, and you can see the photographer, Neil Armstrong, mirrored in the visor.
For me, the greatest image is the footprint, and it's a very simple, iconic image. Footprints are evocative things. Why are we the way we are? One of the reasons is we began to walk upright in Africa, and only 4 million years later, there's a footprint on the moon. You juxtapose those two things, and you see what we've managed to do as a species in a very short space of geological time.
Neil and Buzz, the President of the United States is in his office now and would like to say a few words to you. Over.
Having watched the landing from the White House, a relieved President Nixon makes the first ever lunar phone call.
I just can't tell you how proud we all are of what you have done.
The President's words have been carefully edited by Frank Borman.
NASA had sent over a suggested script involved Nixon taking credit for the success of the landing. I pointed out to him that he really didn't do anything for the landing. That was all prior to his administration. I said, I don't think you should do this. And he agreed with me.
Because of what you have done, the heavens have become a part of man's world.
Having put its men on the moon, America can afford to be magnanimous. And when the astronauts leave a plaque for future visitors to read, their message is universal.
So read the plaque that's on the front landing gear of this LEM.
I sat in several meetings as we scripted what would be left on the moon, but when push came to shove, everything always went back to the very basics.
Dear men from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon, became in peace for all mankind.
And the important thing there was for all mankind, not just for the United States of America, but we came on behalf of the world.
After 21 hours and 36 minutes on the surface of the moon, the lunar module prepares to fire its single ascent engine.
Tranquility Base, Houston, you're cleared for takeoff.
The part of the flight that I was most concerned about was their ascent.
Roger, understand. We're number one on the runway. Roger.
If they couldn't get off, they were dead.
5, port stage, engine arm ascent, proceed.
When we knew that the ascent engine had fired, the monster that lived under my bed, right, had been slayed.
Oh, beautiful. Very smooth.
At that moment, the world went to the moon. It's as if we were all with them. And I think that's why Kennedy was so clever, because if you just send an object to the moon, that's great. But if you send people, we go there with them, we feel the emotion, we share the joy.
I had the sense that it wasn't just every American who was interested, but it was people from around the world. The whole world stopped and took notice, and everyone could agree that this was a good thing, unless you were extremely grumpy.
And so, an achievement born in the heat of the Cold War is hailed as a triumph for all humanity.
After the flight of Apollo 11, we were privileged to make a world tour, and I was amazed by the reception that we got. Everywhere we went, people felt part of it. And I thought that was a wonderful, wonderful response.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes.
The Apollo program ends in 1972, but it leaves quite a legacy. And none of those who played a part will forget the day we walked on the moon.
We had this dream that we're going to go do this thing. We were challenged by President Kennedy to do this with tens of thousands of things that had to work perfectly. And we made it happen.
It's one small step for man.
Hey, we did it. We human beings have left the planet, gone to the moon.
One giant leap for mankind.
This moment where we first stepped on to another heavenly body, I'm just very, very thankful that my generation got to do that.